Let's get one thing straight from the beginning. I'm a gold digger. I said it so you don't have to. I didn't stumble into a life of luxury. I calculated my way into it. My mother used to say, it's just as easy to fall in love with a rich man as a poor one. She died working 2 jobs, so I figured she was probably onto something. My rich man was Kent Aston, billionaire, tech mogul, and my husband of exactly 6 months when this story begins. Our home was less of a house and more of a monument. A cold, sprawling glass and steel palace perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Everything was polished to a blinding sheen, including me. I was the newest, shiniest accessory in Kent's collection. My job was to look beautiful, be silent at the right times, and laugh at his jokes. In return, I had a black Amex card with no limit and a wardrobe full of clothes that cost more than my mother's car. But a gilded cage is still a cage. The silence in that house was deafening. Kent was 40 years my senior, and his idea of a thrilling Friday night was watching the stock market close in his study. I was drowning in silk and diamonds, and I'd never been lonelier. That's when I started noticing the gardener. His name was Robert. He was probably in his late 20s, with sun-streaked brown hair and hands that looked like they knew how to work. He was always there, a quiet, steady presence in the vast, manicured gardens. While Kent was inside manipulating digital fortunes, Robert was outside, coaxing life out of the earth. I'd watch him from the infinity pool, my designer sunglasses hiding the direction of my gaze. He never looked at me. Not really. He'd give a polite, distant nod if our eyes happened to meet, but that was it. He saw the mansion, the wife, the display. He didn't see me. One afternoon, bored out of my mind, I wandered into the rose garden. It was Robert's domain, a breathtaking explosion of color and scent. He was on his knees, carefully tending to a bed of deep crimson roses. "They're beautiful," I said, my voice feeling too loud in the quiet garden. He didn't startle. He just finished his task and looked up, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove. His eyes were the color of the earth after a rain. "They are," he said, his voice calm and low. "But fragile. Too much sun they scorch, too much water the roots rot. It's a constant balance." "Sounds complicated," I replied, trying to sound airy and unconcerned. He looked directly at me, and for the first time, it felt like someone was actually looking through the expensive facade. "It is, but the struggle is what makes them strong. The ones that are bobbied too much never develop deep roots." His words felt like a judgment. I felt a flush creep up my neck. Was he talking about the roses or about me? That was the first crack. A tiny hairline fracture in my perfectly constructed world. I started finding excuses to be in the garden. I'd ask him pointless questions about hydrangeas or soil, just to hear him talk. He was intelligent, well-read in a way that had nothing to do with business school. He'd quote poetry about nature, not to impress, but because he genuinely felt it. One day, a rare, violent storm hit the coast. Kent was away on business, and the power in the main house flickered and died. The vast, dark mansion felt like a tomb. I was terrified of thunderstorms, a childhood fear that money couldn't erase. I heard a frantic knocking at the glass patio doors. It was Robert, soaked to the bone, holding a massive flashlight. "The greenhouse," he shouted over the wind. "The automatic vents failed. The entire orchid collection will be shredded." Without thinking, I pulled on a raincoat and followed him out into the howling gale. We spent an hour in that greenhouse, a chaotic, humid jungle in the middle of the storm. We battled against the wind to manually crank the vents closed, our hands slipping, rain lashing the glass walls. It was the most alive I'd felt in years. We were a team. We were saving something beautiful. Afterwards, standing in the relative quiet of the secured greenhouse, dripping wet and breathing heavily, he looked at me. I was a mess, my hair plastered to my face, my designer jeans ruined. And he smiled. Not a polite, distant smile. A real, genuine, breathtaking smile. "You're full of surprises, Mrs. Aston," he said. "Jenny," I corrected him, my heart hammering for a reason that had nothing to do with the storm. "Call me Jenny." In that moment, surrounded by the scent of wet earth and exotic flowers, the gold digger and the gardener just looked at each other. And the world I had so carefully built began to tilt on its axis. After the storm, nothing was the same. The polite distance between Robert and me had been washed away. Now there was a current, a palpable electric tension that hummed in the air every time we were in the same room or even the same garden. We began a dangerous, secret dance. I'd wake up with a thrill, my day no longer a blank canvas of boredom, but a series of potential moments where I might see him. I started bringing him a glass of iced tea in the afternoons. He started leaving a single, perfect bloom on the patio table for me every morning, a scarlet camellia, a deep blue iris, a sprig of jasmine. They were messages, a secret language of flowers blooming right under my husband's nose. Our meetings became more deliberate. We'd meet in the old, unused citrus grove at the far edge of the property, hidden from the house by a thick wall of cypress trees. It was our secret world. He built a simple bench from scrap wood. He'd talk about his dream of owning his own small nursery one day, of growing rare, heirloom vegetables and teaching kids about gardening. His dreams were simple, tangible. They were about creating, not acquiring. And me, I started talking, really talking. I told him about my mother, about the constant fear of bills and eviction notices that defined my childhood. I told him why I married Kent, not as a confession, but as an explanation of the scared, desperate girl I used to be. He listened. He didn't judge. He just said, "Survival looks different for everyone, Jenny, but are you surviving now or are you just waiting?" The first time he touched me, it wasn't planned. I was reaching for a lemon and he was reaching to get it for me. Our hands brushed. It was an innocent contact, but it felt like a lightning strike. We both froze. The air in the citrus grove was thick with the scent of blossoms and unspoken desire. He was the one who pulled away. "Jenny, we can't," he whispered, his voice rough with restraint. "He's my boss, you're his." "Wife," I finished for him, the word tasting like ash. "I know what I am, but when I'm with you, I forget. With you, I feel like a person, not a possession." That was the day he kissed me. It was nothing like the dry, perfunctory kisses I shared with Kent. Robert's kiss was slow, deep, and tasted of sunshine and mint from the leaves he'd been crushing. It was a kiss that promised a different kind of life, a real one. Our affair became the true center of my life. The mansion became the backdrop for my secret reality. I'd lie in my cold, king-sized bed next to my snoring husband and dream of the heat of Robert's skin, the feel of his work-roughened hands on my body, the sound of his heart beating under my ear as we lay together in the hayloft of an old tool shed he'd cleaned out for us. But with the intense happiness came a gnawing, terrifying fear. Kent was not a stupid man. He was a predator who'd made his fortune by sensing weakness in others. One evening, over a silent dinner, he put down his wine glass and looked at me. "You've been spending a lot of time in the gardens," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes like flint. I froze, a piece of asparagus halfway to my mouth. My heart tried to claw its way out of my chest. "It's peaceful," I managed to stammer. "Is it?" he mused, swirling the burgundy liquid in his crystal glass. "I've been thinking of firing the gardener, Robert. His work has become distracted lately, don't you think?" The threat was veiled but crystal clear. He knew, or at least he suspected. I felt the walls of my gilded cage constrict, the bars pressing in. I had to end it with Robert. I had to, or I would ruin us both. I went to our tool shed the next day, my heart shattered. I had to tell him it was over. But when I saw him there, turning to me with that open, loving smile, the words died in my throat. "I can't do this anymore, Robert," I finally whispered, tears streaming down my face. "He knows, or he suspects, he'll destroy you." Robert didn't flinch. He walked over to me and took my hands. "Then let him. I don't care about the job, Jenny. I care about you. Leave him." "Leave him," I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "And go where? Do what? I have nothing that's truly mine. It's all his." "You'll have me," he said, his voice fierce, his eyes blazing with a conviction that stole my breath. "We'll have nothing, but it will be ours. We'll build it together. I'm not asking you to choose a life of poverty, Jenny. I'm asking you to choose a life of love." It was the bravest, most terrifying thing anyone had ever said to me. And in that moment, looking into his eyes, I made my choice. The gold digger was ready to walk away from the gold. "Okay," I breathed, the word feeling like a promise, like a prayer. Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell him tonight. I left the tool shed, my heart pounding with a mixture of sheer terror and exhilarating freedom. I was going to choose love. I was going to be brave. I never got the chance. That night, I heard a terrible crash from Kent's study. I ran in to find him on the floor, clutching his chest, his face a horrible shade of gray. He was dead before the ambulance even arrived. A massive heart attack. The gilded cage had just become a prison of a different kind. And I was about to discover that Kent Aston had the last, cruelest laugh from beyond the grave. The weeks after Kent's death were a blur of black dresses, somber lawyers, and hollow condolences. I played the part of the grieving widow perfectly, and in a strange way I was grieving. Not for Kent, but for the future I had just chosen, the future that had died with him. Robert kept his distance, a ghost on the edges of the property. Our eyes would meet across the lawn, filled with a universe of unspoken pain and questions. I was now a billionaire widow. The power dynamic between us had shifted into something even more vast and unbridgeable. How could I now ask him to be with me? It would look exactly like what I had always been accused of being. It would taint whatever we had. Finally, the day of the reading of the will arrived. I sat in a leather chair in Kent's imposing study, facing his lawyer, a man as cold and polished as the desk he sat behind. Robert had been summoned too, which I found strange. He stood awkwardly by the door, still in his work clothes. The lawyer began reading the dry, legal language. Kent had left generous bequests to his various companies and charities. And then he got to me. To my wife, Jennifer Aston, the lawyer read, adjusting his glasses, I leave my entire estate, including all properties, holdings, and assets, in perpetuity. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me. It was done. I was free, and I was unimaginably wealthy. I dared a glance at Robert. He looked down at his boots, a resigned expression on his face. He thought he'd lost me for good. But the lawyer wasn't finished. He cleared his throat. However, he continued, the word hanging in the air like a guillotine blade, this bequest is subject to one non-negotiable condition. He looked directly at me, his gaze unwavering. Jennifer will retain control of the Aston fortune only for as long as she remains my widow. Should she remarry, or should it be proven she is in a cohabitating relationship akin to marriage, the entire estate will be immediately and irrevocably transferred to a newly established corporate trust, effectively disinheriting her. The silence in the room was absolute. I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't breathe. It was a masterstroke, a final, cruel joke from the grave. He knew. He must have known about Robert all along. He wasn't just preventing me from marrying anyone, he was specifically preventing me from marrying him. He had bought me, and even in death, he refused to let me go. I was to be his eternal widow, a billionaire prisoner. I looked at Robert. The devastation on his face was a physical blow. He understood immediately. The money that now stood between us was an insurmountable fortress. If I chose him, I would be choosing a life of poverty, just as I'd feared. But this time, it wouldn't be our nothing. It would be my choice to throw away $1 billion for him. Could any love survive under that kind of weight? The lawyer finished and left. Robert and I were alone in the study. The space between us, once filled with electric possibility, was now a chasm of silence and despair. He won, Robert finally whispered, his voice broken. No, I said, my own voice trembling, but the words sounded weak, hollow. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a love that was now a torture. What do we do, Jenny? Do I become your secret gardener forever? A ghost you meet in the tool shed while you're the queen of this castle? I don't know, I choked out. Robert, I love you. I was ready to give it all up for you. I know, he said, taking a step toward me, then stopping as if hitting an invisible wall. But that was when it was a choice between him and me. This is a choice between the life we could have had and $1 billion. That's not a choice. That's a punishment. He turned and walked out of the study, leaving me alone in the vast, silent mansion. I was the sole owner of everything, and I had never felt more impoverished in my life. So here I am, the gold digger who got everything she ever wanted and lost everything that truly mattered. I live in a palace, but my heart lives in a tool shed. I see Robert every day. We pass each other like polite strangers. The love is still there, a living, breathing thing trapped behind a glass wall of money and a dead man's vindictive will. The question now isn't whether I'm a gold digger. I think I've proven I'm not. The question is, what is love worth? Is it worth $1 billion? Is it worth walking away from a fortune to build a life from scratch with the man who sees your soul? I look at him and I think, maybe it is. Or maybe I'm about to make the second biggest mistake of my life.